You know that feeling when you grab a cheap point-and-shoot on a whim, only to discover the images look flat, the focus hunts, and the low-light performance is a disaster? I've been there more than once, and that regret makes me extra cautious before I drop cash on a new camera. So the big question is whether the Sony Alpha 7C feels like a smarter buy or just another pricey gamble. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's dig into the real-world experience, because buying a full-frame body isn't just about the badge on the front, it's about whether the kit will actually make your photos and videos look better without turning you into a tech support hotline. First off, the Alpha 7C lives up to its claim of being the world's smallest and lightest full-frame mirrorless. It's roughly the size of a typical APS-C camera, yet it packs a 24.2 megapixel back-illuminated sensor. That sensor size is the biggest factor in getting that creamy background blur and the high ISO tolerance you hear about all the time. In practice, I've taken it on a 3-day hiking trip through a national park, and even at ISO 6400 the images held detail without the usual color noise that ruins nighttime landscapes. The 15-stop dynamic range also means you can recover highlights from a sunrise without blowing them out, something that cheap alternatives simply can't pull off. Autofocus is where many mirrorless cameras either shine or stumble, and the 7C brings 693 phase detection points covering 93% of the frame. On a busy street scene, the camera locked onto moving subjects with barely a hiccup, and the IAF for both humans and animals worked reliably after a short learning curve. I tried it for a family gathering where kids were darting around, and the focus never missed a beat. For someone who worries about hunting-type focus lag, that confidence is a major win. Low-light performance is often the litmus test for full-frame bodies, and the 7C's ISO range of 50204800 is impressive on paper. In the field, I found the sweet spot around ISO 3200 to 6400 for indoor events. Images stayed clean, and the 14-bit RAW files gave plenty latitude for post-processing. You won't get the same level of noise-free detail as a flagship model at ISO 12800, but you also won't be stuck using a flash in most situations. That balance feels like a practical compromise for a camera that's meant to be carried around all day. Stabilization is another everyday concern. The 7C includes a 5-axis in-body image stabilization, IBIS, that works well with the kit 2870mm f/3.55.6 lens I tested. Handheld video at 4K 30fps stayed smooth, and stills benefited from a couple of stops of shake reduction, making it possible to shoot handheld at slower shutter speeds in dim lighting. If you're a videographer who needs buttery smooth motion without a gimbal, the built-in IBIS is a genuine asset, especially given the camera's compact form factor. Now, let's talk lenses. Sony's mount ecosystem is massive, but the native full-frame lineup still leans heavily on third-party options for prime lenses under 35mm. That means if you already own a collection of APS-C lenses, you'll need to adapt them, which adds a small amount of extra bulk and may affect autofocus speed. For travelers who want a single versatile walk-around lens, the 2870mm is adequate, but you won't get the ultra-wide angles or the super-sharp 50mm f/1.8 without spending more. The upside is that you can eventually tap into Sony's growing roster of full-frame primes, and many third-party manufacturers like Sigma and Tamron are delivering solid options at reasonable prices. Menu navigation on Sony bodies has a reputation for being labyrinthine, and the 7C is no exception. The touchscreen helps a lot. Swiping to change focus points or adjusting exposure settings feels natural, and the quick menu overlay reduces the need to dive into deep submenus for most daily shooting. However, if you're coming from a DSLR with a straightforward button layout, expect a few days of trial and error before muscle memory kicks in. That learning curve isn't a deal-breaker, but it's something to consider if you need to be production-ready the moment you power on. Battery life is often an overlooked metric for mirrorless cameras because the electronic viewfinder, EVF, can be a drain. The 7C uses Sony's NPFZ100 cell, which the manufacturer rates at about 740 shots per charge. In my tests, that translated to roughly 500,600 usable images when I was shooting a mix of stills and video with the EVF active. It's not a weekend trip to the mountains kind of endurance, but it's comparable to other compact full-frame bodies. Carrying a spare battery is still advisable for longer shoots, especially if you plan on a lot of 4K recording. So, who should actually buy the Alpha 7C? If you're a travel photographer or a content creator who values a full-frame sensor but hates lugging around a DSLR-sized rig, this camera hits the sweet spot. It's also a solid entry point for beginners who want to future-proof their gear. Starting with a full-frame body means you